We continue our coverage of breaking news from the U.S. Open Golf Championship.
A blimp has crashed near the Erin Hills Golf Course.
There is a report of an injury, and spectators say that the occupant of the blimp, the person flying the blimp, parachuted out. We don't have that confirmed at this point, but spectators have said that, and the video does appear to show someone ejecting from the blimp.
So again, emergency responders. This is a new vantage point. We are just beginning to watch this along with you today that go on, and how they stabilize a patient and really take a chaotic situation and bring order so that somebody can get the care that they need.
As this object hit the ground, you could see a burst of smoke, a bit of an explosion. There were some flames. So this is really, really quick efforts. By the time that I arrived on scene, it was within 10 minutes that Flight for Life was here. Now they are taking off.
Here more now is from the USGA. According to local authorities, a commercial blimp not affiliated with the USGA or the U.S. Open Championship broadcast crashed in an open field approximately a half-mile from the Erin Hills Golf Course. They're putting the time at 11:15 this morning.
Where the advertising blimp crashed in a ball of fire. This video shows the moments after the crash as the blimp record burns and then goes up into a giant ball of flames. It happened in a field about a mile from the Erin Hills Golf Course, and the pilot was the only person, we're told, who was on the blimp. He suffered burns. The Washington County Sheriff's Office calls his injuries serious. He was taken from the scene by Flight for Life.
She's spoken with several witnesses. She is live now in the town of Erin. Lindsay.
Bill, right here is where a father and son were casually driving by, and two tree trimmers were cutting down an old oak when the blimp crashed to the ground. And with all the excitement around the U.S. Open, there were lots of people that saw the aircraft in trouble and came to help quickly. Now we'll be able to show you some of that Sky Drone 58 footage over the crash site. The blimp now really just looks like a white tarp with plastic. Now the blimp, as we said, was not affiliated with the U.S. Open and wasn't flying over the tournament, but it was near the tournament advertising for PenFed Credit Union. Once the blimp crashed to the ground, it caused an explosion. Law enforcement arrived to the scene in minutes, and Flight for Life airlifted the pilot to a hospital about a half hour after the crash. AirSign, which owned the blimp, tweeted that the pilot rode the deflating and smoking blimp to the ground, and the air tank exploded after he made it to safety. Witness Hunter Getsky and his dad were watching the whole incident. They actually stopped to take video just to admire the blimp. Then they saw it deflating and heard the motor kicking, realizing something was wrong.
So the tanks exploded.
Well, it was just unreal. When he first said, I said, oh, this isn't good. Like we said, you know, there's probably people inside, you know, and it was a terrible feeling. So I pulled over, and I was actually trying to figure out how we can get over there and start running out to it. But then the state troopers were here in no time because they were just up the road for the U.S. Open.
Working parking detail.
So it actually worked out well because they were flying in here in a hurry, and then the rescue squads were coming in, and we heard.
Well, that pilot is expected to pull through. Reporting live from the town of Erin, Lindsay Branwald, CBS 58 News.
Lindsay, thank you. Take a look at the photo of the blimp that crashed. As you heard from Lindsay, it's an advertising blimp, not the kind the networks use to provide those aerial views during golf coverage.
And that they are just really trying to keep the pilot in their thoughts as they go through the tournament this weekend, but they're also hoping to be able to watch those players do what they do best.
Never heard of this happening, and this is the first time it's been here in Wisconsin, and I have never heard of anything like this happening. I mean, it's sad from a historical perspective that this crash happened, but on the other hand, it's great, that we're actually happening it finally. So hopefully, again, everyone can enjoy it under the circumstances.
Now, as the investigation continues with that incident, as we've heard from Lindsay and our team coverage, we're also hearing for fans that they really shouldn't expect any additional delays related to the incident.
Now, a lot of people were actually able to see what happened out here on the fourth hole. We were actually sitting behind a network TV crew out of Canada. They were on the fourth hole when this happened. They were trying to kind of recall it for us and tell us what happened. They said that it was a very eerie and almost disturbing sight to see this massive blimp up in the air kind of deflate and then fall to the ground. We also know that Brent Snedeker, a player here at the U.S. Open, was there when it happened. He recalls it for us this afternoon.
Was that the puff of smoke I saw? Is everybody okay? Yeah. My caddy made a comment on the ninth hole. He said the blimp's not looking good. I guess it was nose down. I didn't think anything of it, and then I saw a big puff of black smoke.
A really wild thing to see as you are trying to play a major championship. I will tell you that each of the players that we interviewed after their round of golf immediately asked if everybody was okay.
Do you think wind played a role at all with this crash?
Well, the winds were picking up right around that time at 11 o'clock in the morning. We can take you back some of the wind gusts from some of the surrounding areas that we pick up our weather data. We saw some of the gusts approaching 20 in Watertown, Waukesha, and West Bend out of the west-northwest. So there's a possibility that wind could have had somewhat of a factor, but we weren't looking at 30 or 40-mile-an-hour winds, so nothing.
CEO of Florida-based AirSign identified the pilot as Trevor Thompson.
Now, Thompson is expected to be okay, but some say that he may have died if it weren't for the brave actions of the blimp's crew chief. TBS.
In this case, it's of Matt Schmidt, who knew he had to jump into action to save his friend Trevor.
The video, as hard as it is to watch, is definitely worth another look.
As soon as I saw it was falling, I was running because I knew about where it was gonna end up.
Matt Schmidt watched it all happen with his own eyes.
He just talked to me, let me know that he was gonna be coming in because the wind was, starting to pick up a little bit. He was probably 150 feet.
The blimp was then pulled up to 500 feet, and Matt watched part of it fold in on itself, then catch fire and the fall to the ground. Once Matt reached the wreckage, he noticed Trevor pulled himself out as best he could since he was injured.
I just turned him on his back and just, kind of drug him as far as I could. And I made it to, it was probably like 50 feet. That's when like the first tank, blew.
A more intense blast followed. Trevor was wearing a fire protection suit and was rushed to the hospital with some burns.
God was watching out for us because, it was a bad situation. Just glad he's okay.
The Washington County Sheriff's Office tells us they do not suspect foul play in the crash of a blimp near the U.S. Open at Erin Hills.
And that's despite the fact a man admitted he threatened to shoot it down.
That's on Phil's house.
The blimp.
Holy crashed. Did you guys get that?
The pilot is still in the hospital recovering from that crash, but tonight we have new information that a local farmer was a suspect. CBS 58's David A. live in Washington County with the very latest. David?
Good evening, Bill and Kate. And I spoke with that farmer today, and he tells me he was upset that blimp was taking off and landing near his property, so he told deputies he was going to shoot it down.
He had a complaint of it disturbing his cattle.
Washington County Sheriff Dale Schmidt describes the call his department took before this blimp crash last week.
Sort of asked a sarcastic question of whether he could shoot the thing down or not, something to that effect. And the dispatcher, of course, responded no.
A few hours later, the blimp crashed less than a half mile from his property.
Detectives and then eventually the FBI assisted us in locating the person who had called in that complaint.
Schmidt says that man has a solid alibi, and investigators were able to quickly figure out he did not cause the blimp to crash. I spoke to the man who made the call. He didn't want us to show his face or property, and we're not using his name since he hasn't been charged with a crime. But he tells me he watched the blimp crash from the same place thousands of other people saw it, on the Erin Hills golf course. He says detectives checked the U.S. Open's ticket system to verify he went through the gates well before the crash.
We can all say there is no evidence at this point of any kind of foul play, criminal acts that brought that aircraft down.
So the CEO from that company that runs that blimp tells me that his blimp crashed in such an unusual way that people across the industry still don't know how it happened, and he wants every possibility investigated. Meanwhile, the National Transportation Safety Board has what's left of that blimp crash as it continues its investigation.
An update now on that blimp crash near the U.S. Open earlier this month. The National Transportation Safety Board says an envelope panel failure caused the blimp to go down on the opening day of the competition. The NTSB reports the pilot was about 1,000 feet in the air when he decided to return to land. Well, when he approached an airstrip, a rising current of air forced the blimp suddenly 500 feet higher. That's when two envelope panels tore. He heard the tears. The material touched the propane-fueled burner and caught fire, sending the blimp nose down into the ground. The pilot was seriously injured in the crash.
A Washington County farmer calls 911 threatening to shoot down a blimp near Erin Hills during the U.S. Open.
And the Washington County Sheriff's Office doesn't suspect foul play in the crash. CBS 58's Evan Krugel joins us live in the studio to explain why the blimp company doesn't agree. Evan?
Yeah, Kate, that man says he was simply frustrated when he called 911 and made those comments about the blimp. But the Florida-based company that owns the blimp says it's not so sure, and it's launching an independent investigation into that crash.
Washington County 911, where's your emergency?
It was just hours before a blimp went down outside Erin Hills that dispatchers received this call from a man in the area.
We just landed a great big blimp off at the property next to me, and it's scaring the living shit out of my cattle. Can I shoot that son of a down?
That 911 call catching the attention of AirSign, which released this statement today, saying the 911 call that included a threat to shoot down the airship does concern us. But the sheriff says he's all but ruled out that possibility.
You can all say there is no evidence at this point of any kind of foul play.
Even the pilot, Trevor Thompson, telling police the crash was simply an equipment failure involving an older airship. From his hospital bed, Thompson told investigators he had never crashed prior to today, but decided it was better to crash hard than explode in the air. Thompson would go on to call that rapid fall to the ground 10 seconds of absolute terror. Now, according to his co-workers, Thompson could have been killed if he had not been wearing that fire retardant suit. He remains in the hospital recovering from those injuries. Bill?
They've received several reports of a blimp that was coming down on fire.
It was intense. Yeah, there's nothing like a burn pain.
Burns, a broken back, and a lacerated liver. But Trevor Thompson survived after his thermal airship caught fire and crashed near Erin Hills Golf Course in June. The blimp was destroyed.
We actually don't know what happened, but we know what it caused, which was a failure of the whole airship, of the outside fabric. And it did happen quite quickly and caught fire quite quickly.
Thompson was trying to land. He says the wind had picked up and he caught an updraft which pushed him back up 500 feet.
I'd describe it kind of like an air explosion, not like a fuel explosion. It was quite loud. It shook the gondola, and I was able to look above me and actually see blue sky. And it had blown out a full panel. And then I heard another one and another one.
His first thought wasn't panic.
I was very conscious, working through my procedures, shutting down the engine, shutting down the fuel, strapping in the seat belt. Then when I began to descend and it nosed down, I don't remember anything at that point.
Luckily, he was wearing a fireproof suit and gloves, which likely saved his life. Thompson and his family live in Atlanta. They were only visiting Wisconsin.
This was our first time flying here. Yeah, so we came in the night before, and that was our first flight that day. We were planning on flying all week, and then I ended up staying a month.
His wife, Lorraine, was not at the course when the crash happened.
I found out from a friend who I had met in Milwaukee, and she told me via text that she had heard something had happened. It was panic.
Thompson was taken by Flight for Life to the trauma center at Froedtert Hospital. He spent a week there, then 3 weeks in the burn unit at Columbia St. Mary's, where he had 5 skin grafts.
Incredibly intense. I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
The road to recovery is not an easy one.
Burns, they have to be cleaned twice a day, and they don't knock you out for it.
Despite the pain, he says he wouldn't do anything differently on that fateful day.
No anger, no resentment. If I inspected that blimp today, and if it was put together the way it was that day, I'd fly it again. I didn't find anything wrong.